Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the Third Legacy Monthly Tradition Study. We're going to be studying Tradition 4 tonight, and we've got an awesome group of folks. We have a nice panel for you to talk about Tradition 4. Again, this is monthly, so next month you can join us on the fourth Tuesday, and we'll be talking about Tradition 5 next month. You can find all of these recordings along with lots of other great speakers and workshops on our YouTube channel, Seattle Inner Group. So spread the word. In the meantime, I'm going to be turning this over to Stephen.
Well, as Lara said, welcome everyone, and we're the Seattle group that are hosting this tradition workshop, which we're real happy to do. And tonight we have 2 out of the 3 10-minute speakers that have shown up so far. And thank you very much for that. And the format for those who may be new is we usually have 3 10-minute speakers on the tradition, and then we spend the rest of the time talking about it, asking questions, giving opinions, setting other people straight that were wrong, at least in our heads. And as a result, we hope that we all come away with a better understanding of the tradition. So, Abby, you're up first. And thank you, thank you.
All right, I'm Abby. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Abby.
Hi, thank you, Lara, for asking me to do this. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be of service and to dive deeper into all this literature, the past few days, knowing I had to talk about it. So thank you. I think I'll maybe just start by reading the long form of Tradition 4 out of the 12 and 12. So, Tradition 4, with respect to its own affairs, each AA group should be responsible to no other authority than its own conscience. But when its plans concern the welfare of neighboring groups also, those groups ought to be consulted. And no group, regional committee, or individual should ever take any action that might greatly affect AA as a whole without conferring with the trustees of the General Service Board. On such issues, our common welfare is paramount. So I like the long form of the traditions just to get a little extra insight, how it talks about the neighboring groups. It doesn't say that in the short form, which is something I hadn't really considered before. And then I want to read, there's just so much great literature on the traditions. There's the Language of the Heart book, Bill's Grapevine writings. There's this tradition checklist, all those great questions that maybe I'll ask, or I'll talk about 1 or 2 of them. There's this introduction to the 12 traditions pamphlet. There's the 12 and 12. It's great. It's just so great that we have these resources, to learn more about Alcoholics Anonymous, its foundation, how it came to be, why these traditions are in place. They're in place for a reason, So I'm just grateful to be. Well, also, Lara, I just want to say thank you to making me fall in love with AA again, really, and getting me more involved in service. Not just the steps, but the traditions, and I'm grateful for that. But so I think the other one I want to talk about and read is the illustrated, like the comic, the 12 Traditions Illustrated. All right, I'm gonna read a little bit more. If someone else could be timing me also, that would be great. I don't have a timer, so just give me a wave or something. All right, a member who does any amount of traveling finds the AA spirit much the same everywhere. But apart from this inward kinship, there are vast differences among groups. Here, the traveler finds 3 members discussing the steps in somebody's living room. There, 300 listening to speakers in a church auditorium. In one part of the US, respectful silence greets the speaker who begins, "My name is Anne and I'm an alcoholic." In another, everybody happily shouts, "Hi, Anne." And in many other places, she may introduce herself with her full name at a 1 hour meeting or a 90-minute meeting. In each neighborhood in every part of the world reached by AA, the local group is free to work out its own customs. As always, freedom brings responsibility. Because each group is autonomous, it's up to each group to avoid any action that might harm AA. And there have been such actions, or this tradition would be unnecessary. Implicit throughout AA's traditions, Bill W. wrote, is the confession that our fellowship has its sins. We admit that we have character defects as a society, and these defects threatens us continually. Blown up to multiple size, the big ego may inspire one group to take over all the public information work for its area without consulting any of the other local groups. Once the group has decided we have all the answers, the lid's off. The group may then decide that, let's say, the 11th tradition is an outdated technicality. This is a competitive age. We're going to come right out and give AA some good vigorous promoting. To the general public, this one conspicuous group is AA. Its antics reflect not only on the ignored neighboring groups, but on the entire fellowship. In a way, the 4th tradition is like the 4th step. It suggests that the AA group should take honest inventory of itself, asking about each of its independently planned actions. Would this break any tradition? Like the individual member who chooses to make the steps his or her guide toward happy sobriety, the wise group recognizes that the traditions are not hindering technicalities, they are approved guides toward the chief objective of all AA groups. Which I think is the next one, carrying the message to the still suffering alcoholic. I think, in my personal experience, where I feel the most autonomy or the most power in this tradition is at my home group in the business meeting, where we talk about how do we want our group to run. Is it important to us that we don't read outside literature? Do we want to be an open topic meeting? Do we want to be a step study meeting? Do we want to be a big book study meeting? Where I feel like I can share, my experience, strength, and hope, my opinions and ideas about how our group should run is really in my one home group meeting. And I feel a great responsibility now to do so as well, to show up to my business meetings, to share my thoughts, my opinions, my ideas, my experience, the literature that I'm reading, the suggestions from my sponsor, to share how I want our group to be more efficient and to run and to follow their traditions. And in all other groups, I feel kind of like it's my job to just, just listen and observe and feel, okay, so this is how this group is running things. Does that speak to me? Does that work for me? Am I gonna keep coming back to this group? Do I like how they're doing things or not? And to not say that, one group is necessarily doing things the right way, which I'd like to think there is a right way, but all this literature kind of tells me maybe there's not just one right way. So if I don't like how that group is running their meeting, I don't have to go back to it. The most power I feel is in my home group, and can I help this home group to follow the traditions to the best of my ability? Ooh, is someone timing me?
Yeah, it's been like 6 or 7 minutes, but that's okay. If that's all you have, that's fine.
No, I mean there's more I could go on. I hope someone else will read the bits about in language of the heart, maybe. But let's go through maybe some of these questions on the traditions checklist. Number one, do I insist that there are only a few right ways of doing things in AA? You know, sometimes I do. Sometimes I do, and that's something that, I need to pay attention to and look at because maybe there's not, maybe there's other ways. Two, does my group consider the welfare of nearby groups in its actions and decisions of AA as a whole? I was trying to think of an example, but nothing really came to mind. Um, uh, the last one. Do I ever criticize certain groups because I think they don't do things how I believe AA should be done? I would say, yes, sometimes I do. And that's something to be mindful about. Do I always bear in mind that to those outsiders who know I am in AA, I may to some extent represent our entire beloved fellowship? Someone did tell me in the early days, you may be the only big book someone ever reads. And so I try to incorporate that, to my best of my ability, one day at a time, 5 minutes at a time, to try to practice these principles, in all my affairs. A progress, not perfection. But I do believe it is important to be a, quote unquote good representative, of AA, because I don't want anyone to be turned off by my actions, by my words. I want people, to know that where AA is, there's a solution. There's a solution to alcoholism. It is here. Yeah. Well, that might be it, guys. But I appreciate you asking me. I appreciate, diving deeper into the literature, and I look forward to hearing what you all have to say about the fourth tradition.
And thank you. We appreciate the effort that you put forth and that you joined us tonight. And next in line on the marquee, we've got Mikey.
Yes, you do. Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see you all. Um, my name's Mike. I'm an alcoholic. I have my sobriety date is 11/9/2016, and I have 7 years of sobriety of AA under me, in me, within me, and I felt that I know everything and I do everything. But then I find out there are traditions. It's not Mikey's way, and this is where tradition 4 for me comes involved. Is that it reminds me when I read tradition 4, and I'm not sure what Gabby did a great. I mean, Abby did a great job of reading everything, and I don't know what to read now because she went exactly what I would do, scan everything. But when I read tradition 4, it is for me, and what I've learned, it's to keep the groups together, the unity and the autonomy of all the groups, that we keep our stuff within our groups. We don't try to run other groups. We don't try to run other ideas, because that is the group conscience, and the group conscience is kind of what rules our fellowship. And when I was new to this, I wanted to change every meeting that I went to. And I was told I could not do that. I have to go to a business meeting. And, but you learn slowly that maybe it's just better to listen and learn, because these things that were going in my head were already done, proven that maybe they're doing it right in the first place. So when I read this, and it's kind of ironic because April 28th is in the daily reflection. If I can find the daily reflection, I have it somewhere. Here it is. It's it states that two magnificent standards in all AA progress, and this is April 28th out of the daily reflection, all AA progress can be reclaimed in terms of just two words: humility and responsibility. And our whole spiritual development can be accurately measured by a degree of adherence to these magnificent standards that have been laid before us. It doesn't say that part, but then it goes from page 271 of As Bill Sees It. It says, to acknowledge and respect the views, accomplishments, and prerogatives of others, and to accept being wrong, as Abby said, shows me the way of humility. And to practice these principles of AA in all my affairs guides me to be responsible. And honoring these precepts gives credence, guess what, to tradition 4 and to all other traditions of the fellowship. Alcoholics Anonymous has evolved a philosophy of life full of valid motivations, rich, highly relevant principles and ethical values, and a view of life which can be extended behind or beyond the confines of the alcoholic population. And to honor these precepts, I need only to pray and care for my fellow man or woman as if one were my brother or sister. So that tells me that when I go to a business meeting, when I practice tradition 4 with other, I have to let go of what all my other things. It's like kind of step 4. We don't want to step on everybody else's toes. We just we want to voice our opinions and let it be heard, and then accept the responsibility of actual the consequences of what's going on. And then we live by, and that's, to me, is tradition 4. It does go on, which I love tradition 4, is because this is where rule 62 comes involved, and it's a little later on, and that's where we don't take our, that's where I believe we don't take ourselves too seriously. And when AA was in their running blind period and when these traditions started coming out, 1954 or something to that effect, and when they brought these traditions, I guess the 12 and 12 started, it was published in 1953 for the 1955 World's Fair, the 55 conference. They were getting too busy, right? And it explains that in 12 and 12, where they wanted to know what other groups, they wanted to have a set of guidelines. They wanted to have a set of rules that everybody can abide by. And in doing so, they found out that it was too much. They had too many things coming in, and that's where the paragraph, and I'd love to read it if you like. And that's where when then came the inevitable explosion, something like the day the boiler burst in the Wembley's clapboard factory. A chill, choke damp of fear with frustration fell over the group. And when that lifted, a wonderful thing happened. The head promoter wrote the foundation office. He said he wished he'd paid some attention to AA experience. Then he did something else that was to become an AA classic. It all went on a little card about a golf score size. The cover read Middleton Group number 1, rule number 62. And once the card was unfolded, a single pungent sentence leaped to the eye. Don't take yourself too damn seriously. And this is what under Tradition 4, an AA group has exercised its right to be wrong. And I love that because all I have to do is proclaim I'm an alcoholic, and I can be wrong, and you can accept that. And I can be convinced that maybe my way or Mikey's way isn't the right way. It could be, I could be wrong. Oh my gosh, humility and progress. So because it had been humbly and willing to apply the lessons to learn, it picked itself up with a laugh and gone on to better things. And even the chief architect standing in the ruins of his dream could laugh at himself. And that is the very acme of humility. And so personally, I have practiced this Tradition 4 recently. I was dealing with a kind of a rebranding of a hall, and the guy that runs the hall wanted to keep a name because he went and bought the LLC for it. You got the trademark for this certain name, and he wanted to use it, but it was affecting other groups, other AA groups as a whole. And fortunately, when I went to another Tradition 4, and it was presented by Baker Bob, and he was on Tradition 4, and everything I was experiencing in this transition, he was reading it in the 12 traditions and in the illustration. I don't think you can see it, but I've got my notes here, and it was kind of fascinating that he stepped down on his thinking. And so it was great to watch Tradition 4 in action, that sometimes our ideas aren't what we should have. And I'm just glad that I was aware of this tradition, that it affected other AA groups as a whole. So that's my story. And I thank you all for allowing me to share and being of service. And I'm going to pass it on to another the third person, whoever the third person is. Enter and sign in, please.
Well, thank you, Mike. And for whatever reason, our third panelist, I guess, had other plans. But and I have a fourth tradition story. Okay, so and it goes like this. In the mid 1990s, my home group was in a church that had never hosted an AA meeting before. And for the meeting turned out to be a big meeting, like 150 people. And all was going well. And after we'd been there for a couple of years, the church put out in a bulletin, which I also belong to that church, but that has nothing to do with anything. that they were going to have a work party. And all the groups, the church had other outreach programs too. All the groups were just invited to participate. It involved like weeding the grounds and work of that nature. And I brought it up to the home group. Hey, the church said, oh, and they're going to provide lunch and all that stuff. It was just an afternoon work party. So I passed on the information the church gave to me to pass on to the group. And the day came, and there were, several or many of us that were just happy to participate in this work day. And we were given the task of painting the nursery, just one of the things on their list during the day. And they had a barbecue, and they also had wheelbarrows filled with ice and beer, because remember, it wasn't just the AA people, all sorts of people were participating. And as far as I mean, I don't think anybody in the AA deal ever had a beer, touched it, or anything like that. But at the end of the day, when it was all over, we were welcomed, thanked profusely, because combined all of the people that showed up, we did a lot of work for the church. And then hell started the next week. I thought it was a done deal. It was just a done deal. And questions came up like, how dare we participate in a church program, because we're an AA meeting. And which I never saw that question coming. Then there was, what about participating in an activity where there's alcohol? And what if they saw people they knew were in AA and they're around other people would drink? Just, that's something I never thought of. And there were people that were very, very adamant about their point of view of violation of the fourth tradition. Maybe I'll show other ones too. And I noticed, because I'm just looking back now, how protective I was of my point of view, that we were just being a good neighbors in a invitation process. Nobody had to join, or nobody had to do anything. But it brought up some interesting thoughts, like, did it occur to any of us, first of all, me, but did it occur to any of us to even think of it in fourth tradition terms? Like, is our participation going to be beneficial to AA as a whole? Because like I think Abby said it earlier, we may be the only AA that a lot of the parishioners see on this day, pitching in and all that stuff, is one way to look at it. And there are various ways to look at it, but we never talked about how our participation or declining to participate could affect our group or AA or anything like that. So it turned out to be a spirited discussion for many weeks that followed, with some people never coming back to that meeting, and some of us, because of our maturity, being able to say, well, good riddance. And getting to see where where our humility and maturity level was. So this what one group can do, we found can affect at least other groups, or AA as a whole, at least in our area, because for that 15 minutes of fame, there was a lot of very strong feelings about doing what we did. And that's my tradition for story for tonight. And again, I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. And maybe can hear from somebody else. Let's start with somebody with a real cool name. How about Steve?
Yeah, there's something to say about that name. There's no doubt about it. I'm Steve R, and I are an alcoholic. There's no doubt about that. Thank you, Abby and Mike. It's good to see everybody. Well, there's been a ton of good stuff said here. I did try to take some notes. Some of my own thinking about this stuff. I remember going to a tradition study one time, and the coolest thing I heard was, and it was on Tradition 4, and the coolest thing was, I have the right to be wrong. And I was always wrong when I was drinking. So I didn't know that you could, come in, get sober, and it was okay to be wrong. It was just kind of this revelation of things that, and the reason that we find out that it's okay to be wrong is because in my case, I was learning what Alcoholics Anonymous and what the traditions were. And I watch, I absolutely love my home group when they're in there making decisions. I always kid with them. I always tell them, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just explaining why I'm right. But and that's a Tradition 4 thing. We don't need people to be right. We need the unity of we need the unity of the group, led by an ultimate authority, a loving God as he expresses himself in that group, to help guide us to be a healthy group. So, one thing I always think about is, if I was visiting a group, I've went to a lot of AA meetings, and I walk in there and I just look at the way they run that meeting, and I'm just thinking, what are they thinking? Boy, do they need my input. And, it's just, they don't need my input any more than, anyway, I really love the fact that AA meetings have the right to make their own decisions, and I want that. I like to see those groups make good decisions to make them a healthy meeting. So when a visitor shows up, walks away, and he tells other people about what AA is doing here, and when the newcomer shows up, they feel good enough that they want to come back. That, to me, is Alcoholics Anonymous at its best. It's not, and then we take it a step further, and then we go, it's not so much what I do or say in a meeting, it's what do I do when I leave the safe space of the meeting, when I'm out there in the real world, when things are, when my guard, when I don't have the book in front of me, or I don't have my notes or whatnot, in that particular case, that's what a God and going to, tradition studies and so on. That's what we get. That's the gift that, is allowed every alcoholic that comes in here and gives it an honest shot, right? So I don't know. It's a tradition we can't live without. I love to see it work in all the many facets that it works when you go to different groups, how they get to run their stuff. And when it's all said and done, AA as a whole is okay. And that's what I care about. I need AA good as a whole. That's enough out of me. There's plenty of other people who can talk about this. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Har.
In Cindy?
Well, what I was thinking about was that I'm still learning so much from this organization, and I learned so much from just going to the meetings. And when groups have things that they're discussing and not that they're not agreeing on, AA also shows me a way to handle what am I trying to say? People that aren't agreeing with each other. And it's a safe place to going to the, what is it, the board meeting? Is that what they're called?
Business meeting?
Business meeting. The business meetings, you get to see how people they deal with conflict and how the group handles it and works through it. And it might not be the solution that I come up with, but maybe part of my solution is in there connected with the solution that other people come up with too. So it's always learning a safe and appropriate way to handle conflicts. And I don't know, it's just great to see that. That's what I got.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Cindy.
Um,
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Did you have something in mind? Oh, anyway, I'm Nancy, alcoholic, and
Nancy.
yeah, thank you, Abby and Mikey, Steve and Steve, for the thoughts that you shared. I think it was really helpful, and Cindy, yours too. I mean, it's absolutely, like my opinion, strong before I got into AA, still strong after AA, and a program that helps me to see how that comes about, and that it can be that I don't have to be right about everything, and I'm frequently wrong, and how to live in harmony with all of that, in language of the heart, which I found to be pretty sweet about tradition 4. And it says that our first 2 traditions, meaning briefly, our common welfare comes first, and there is but one ultimate authority, that those combine and they inform tradition 4 as well. And I think this idea of the group's right to be wrong, to be held inviolate, is what Bill wrote about it. And I thought, what struck me is the amount of trust that are in these traditions, that is woven through this program, that they weren't going to worry about it, but that they have the traditions to underpin our organization and our longevity and our continuation, and that trial and error, which is what the steps help all of us through, is trial and error. And trial and error is it goes through all the traditions as well. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I loved the fact that trust, in this power that kind of overrides the whole deal, makes it so we don't worry too much about any particular group, and that AA as a whole, has survived. I'm done.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. And Mike from Silverdale, you want to weigh in? And you're on mute.
Here we go. I'm Mike, alcoholic.
Mike,
Wow. I'm hearing a lot of good stuff. I like the traditions. I'm like, I'm military. I retired from the military, and when I made chief, I went to indoctrination, and they said, you never will ever say again, I don't know. I'm supposed to say, I'm not sure right now, but I'm going to find out and I'll get back to you. And that's where, any of this stuff goes in one ear and out the other. But I'm learning where to find the information. And that's what's so nice about, we have so many books that tell me what the traditions, the steps, the concepts, it's all around, man. And this particular one, I can relate to this one by seeing how many groups we have just in our district, in anybody's district. We've got so many groups because of a resentment and they say, screw you guys, I'm going to go start my own group. And I think that's how it is, as long as they're not interfering with AA as a whole. And I think it's just amazing how we can do stuff like that and still function as AA as a whole. I remember when I first came in, my sobriety date's August 14, 2017. So I got a little under 7 years. But I remember going to my first couple of group consciences, and there was actual yelling and standing up and pointing the finger and you get out of here kind of a thing. And it's like, the more I went to them, but at the end of the meeting, you know, they hug and they go home, you know, and it was amazing to see. And I learned that those that didn't like what was going on, they went to a different meeting and they got along better at a different meeting because of the differences that they had. But at a group conscience, it's not just one opinion, it's all of our opinions. And that's what's so cool about it. I don't see myself ever being right anymore, or boy, I shouldn't say that. I love being right, but it's nice to know that I've got a group of people that will tell me what the right thing is. It might be wrong to me, but I'm understanding more and more by hearing everybody's opinion and finally agreeing. I might still not agree about it, but as our group, we'll get along a lot better when we all agree on one thing. One other person, even myself, would say, gosh dang it, I sure wish it would have gone my way. But it's in the long run, it seems like we get along so much better when it's group orientated, when we're all agreeing on it. So, gosh, a lot of good stuff. What else did I have? I'm sorry. That's about it. I'm just glad that I made it tonight. Usually I'm doing something else on Tuesday nights, and I figured, you know, I've been wanting to come to this for a while. I've got it on my calendar, and sure enough, Tradition 4 was it. So thank you for all being here. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you for your service. I was in the service too. We used to babysit you guys. So also I wanted to off topic for a second. Would you be available to be on our panel for Tradition 5 next month?
Like I was saying, I usually am not here on Tuesdays. Let me look.
Fourth Tuesday.
Fourth Tuesday.
2, 3, 4.
Bernice hasn't said anything yet.
Hi, family. My name is Bernice. I'm an alcoholic. I don't have anything to say. I'm listening tonight. But thank you.
We weren't going to forget about you, Bernice.
What I do have is a webinar for, I own a homeowner association, or I'm also on the board for homeowner association, and I've got a webinar for that night. So I wouldn't be able to.
Well, okay, maybe another time then, but thank you for considering.
Oh, not a problem. I'd love to, though.
Okay, so, okay, Lara.
My name's Lara, I'm an alcoholic, and so I've been thinking a lot about this because we've been recently talking about, Abby and I have been studying Tradition 4 conveniently recently, which has been interesting because one of the spring assembly topics at the board meeting at the spring assembly in June here at Seattle Intergroup is an AA meeting just because they say they are, or should there be some sort of rules, not rules, but suggestions or
Guidelines.
Oh, sorry, guidelines. Yeah, guidelines to how how an AA meeting should operate. I kind of of course, alcoholics are like, well, they can't tell us what to do, and of course, nobody can tell anybody what to do in AA. Except, anyway, no, but I do believe in the right to be wrong, but I also believe, my experience is that just because I can be wrong doesn't mean I should fight for it, right? I mean, I feel like humility and responsibility are the two key words that were talked about already tonight. And I as an AA member, I have a responsibility to Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a responsibility to my home group. I have a responsibility to the people I sponsor. I have a responsibility to try to learn about the traditions and uphold the traditions to the best of my ability in my personal life, which these traditions checklist talks about. I try to practice these principles in my relationship, which, being autonomous within a relationship is really difficult. And that can be relationships of all kinds, sponsee, sponsor, with my children, with friends, with my employer. So, autonomy is big. It's a big a principle. I think that the thing about the right to be wrong would be that ultimately, and I think it says this somewhere in some of the reading, that ultimately groups will conform out of necessity, because John Barleycorn, will whip us into shape, right? If we're not doing what needs to be done. And not that anybody's telling you to, right? But out of desperation and out of necessity, we will, conform to the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. I sort of wonder, I've been to groups that read everything but AA literature, and I sort of wonder why. Why you'd start an AA group and not, and fight for your right not to read AA literature doesn't really make much sense to me. Open a book study or something. I don't know why people need to call those kinds of meetings AA meetings. But yes, they have the right to be wrong, and yes, they're autonomous, but it doesn't, again, I don't really feel like just because they can be, that they ought to, fight for the right to be wrong. So, and I do believe, and I've struggled with this concept of affecting AA as a whole. What does that mean? And I really like that Abby read the long form of the tradition, because it talks about neighboring groups. It doesn't necessarily, so AA as a whole, there's very few things that my individual AA group is going to do that is going to affect AA worldwide, right? Like that's just not the concept. I believe that was the intention of AA as a whole. And so when a newcomer comes to my group and we're reading all kinds of literature and not reading AA conference approved literature, that new person leaves what they thought was an AA meeting, thinking that having an experience of an AA meeting that doesn't necessarily represent Alcoholics Anonymous. And I believe that affects AA as a whole, because then that person goes and talks about the AA meeting that they just attended the other night and how, what it was like. And I think that it's important that I want to belong to a home group that when somebody comes to that meeting, either visiting or for the first time, that they leave with the experience of Alcoholics Anonymous, and not somebody's bright idea of what they think AA ought to be. So I do think there's a few right ways of doing things in AA, and it's kind of an unpopular position these days, but it's my stance. I feel strongly about the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, and belonging to a home group that that tries to adhere to those suggestions. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And we've probably all heard before that a good meeting starts on time and ends on time, but maybe even a better meeting ends a little early. So if somebody had something else they wanted to jump in, we've still got some time. Mike.
I rearranged some stuff so that I could be at that meeting next month.
Oh, wow, fabulous. And if you can, let's see, we're being recorded, but can you have access to your chat?
I do.
Would you mind putting in your number so I can, I'll just touch bases with you before the meeting next month.
Okay. I'll give you my email and phone number. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, phone number's fine, then I can text. And thank you.
Can we stop?
There was Mike, I wanted to interject on something. There was an inventory question that came up at Greater Seattle Intergroup Inventory, and it had something to do with Abby and her checklist. And it was and it doesn't, it kind of relates to, do you carry business meeting stuff out of the business area? Do you remember that question, Lara? Do you carry business? Do you leave the business of the meeting at the business meeting and not carry it over into like a regular AA meeting? So, you keep it to the business side of AA. Does that?
I don't recall that.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry.
It was just kind of, I'm reflecting on when you come in and someone is trying to, if you go to the business meeting and then like the following Monday you go to the meeting and then you're still carrying over business meeting and trying to change people. Oh, they didn't do that right, and you're not accepting what the group conscience is. You're not abiding by that. I've done that a lot of times where you're building a resentment more than keeping it in, as Nancy was saying, the trust of making the group decision the higher power, and you're not believing it's going to work. You still want it your way. So I think there's a lot of trust, harmony, unity, and practicing humility and being responsible. The end.
Well,
I'm reading my
thanks.
notes. So
And like Lara was talking about a little earlier, there's a lot of interesting things coming up. One question, which I think is a very legitimate question, is an AA meeting an AA meeting just because it says it is?
mhm. There is a Grapevine article about that. I will bring it to Lara's attention. It basically said that intergroups do not get involved in group level activities.
Right, and this is how a lot of tradition studies go. Leaving intergroup completely out of it completely is an AA meeting an AA meeting just because people call it one.
Mhm.
At any rate,
Good question.
oh, Mike.
Yeah, when you're talking about that, are you meaning that is an AA meeting a meeting or a group meeting? Because there is a difference there, correct? Where
Well, right. Yes, there is a difference between a meeting and a group, but as I understand it, they both follow the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. and is a group that follows the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous plus other principles. Is that still an AA group or meeting? I mean, whichever one you want to use. Just for example, there are many groups that don't subscribe to singleness of purpose. And Alcoholics Anonymous agree or don't agree with it, but Alcoholics Anonymous is pretty firm on that position. So I'd say it's more than ever, we still need our traditions.
But it also says that any meeting between 2 or 3 people is considered an AA meeting. That's all.
Provided there is no other affiliation.
Yeah. See, we have our meeting schedule in District 10, and in one part of it, it shows our group meetings, and in the other part, it shows our meetings, which are not group meetings. So we have men's meetings in our meetings, and if a woman was to attend, they would say, "I'm sorry, you cannot come in here." Where if it's a group meeting and it's a men's group meeting, and if a woman shows up, they would allow that woman to come in. Because you want anybody and everybody to come into that meeting if it's an opened group meeting. Was that kind of what you were coming across on, or am I off on this?
Sure.
Well, I suppose that would be one example, although I've never heard of a meeting. So you're saying that if it's the meeting is has the right to keep the woman out, whereas the group would follow the traditions and not keep anybody out. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's why we have just regular like men's meetings or women's meetings are on the back of our sheet that specifically says it's a women's meeting. And if a man shows up, they won't allow the man to come in because it's not a group meeting. It's not associated with GSO. They simply have the meeting on the back of our schedule so that women and or men, when it's a only group, they can attend, so that they can have their meeting without having somebody that's different sex come in. Whereas if it's a group meeting, like I'll say for our Silverdale Hall, we have men's meetings, women's meetings, LGBTQ 1+, or I forget what it consists of anymore. We have many different meetings, even Spanish speaking meetings. But if another individual was to come in there at that time, they would first verify if that was the only place that they could get to, they could then come in. Because you want to have, if they are an alcoholic and they want to come in for a meeting, they're in need of a meeting, they can come in. That would be a group meeting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
never actually heard of that.
well, as far as our time goes, we just blew it by having a great meeting. Now we can still keep it a good one.
Well, thank you, Stephen and Nancy and the Seattle group for hosting and facilitating this tradition for study. So be sure to join us next month on the 4th Tuesday.
Right, the 28th.
Yeah.
Right, the 28th. And Mike, thank you for agreeing to be on the panel next month.
Yeah.
You're
All
welcome.
right.
I got it on my schedule. Okay.
And why don't we close with the responsibility prayer? It's kind of a tradition here, isn't it? One of our traditions.
Yes. Who is
responsible?
I am responsible
When
when anyone,
anywhere,
anywhere
reaches
reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there.
And
for that,
I'm
I am
responsible.
responsible.
Good job.